I started to drink and I started to kind of numb myself. And, I was running from, the destruction that I had caused. And I was incredibly depressed. I was in a tremendous amount of pain. And, I ended up on the 29th story of this building in New York City. And I was just about literally just a hair away, had my legs cranked up and my body just all over this ledge that I was on. And I heard this little whisper, just make it to your sister's wedding. And thank God she got married a month later. Or else I don't think I'd be here on this call today with you, Linda. I believe that we're all just a hair away from something traumatic that could happen to any of us, really. And honestly, that traumatic moment came for me, and the next thing you know, I'm on this freaking building about to jump off.
Welcome to Linda's Corner, where we bring more hope, healing, and happiness to the world. My name is Linda Bjork, and today we're going to be talking about a transformation from addiction to impact. I'm delighted to welcome Keegan Downer. Keegan is the founder of Mindful Meds, and you can reach him at his website, mindfulmeds.io, and on social media. And I'll include those links in the show notes. Welcome, Keegan. I'm so glad that you could join with me today.
Thank you for having me. What an intro. You've got a lovely voice for this.
Thank you. And I'm so excited to be able to talk about this because addiction is so challenging. It can be just like handcuffs where you are trapped. And it usually, not always, but it usually is more than just a physiological addiction to something. Often addiction is sort of a form of self-medicating for something that we're trying to cope with, something we're trying to deal with that is deeper. And so you understand about both of those. Will you mind telling us a little bit about your story and a choice you made in 2016 that kind of turned your life around?
Yeah. So, yeah, my name is Keegan. Thank you so much for having me. And it just reminded me of just a quote from Gabor Maté, who I'm sure you're aware of. But he always says, it's not why the addiction, it's why the pain. And so that's kind of at the underbelly of most addictions, right? Is this pain, this numbing. And I had an interesting story. Like my journey of addiction came from this pocket of time where I had this. Well, I grew up with an alcoholic father. I grew up with a father that had his master's in psychology and was building social programs for what I call the underdog for most of his career. So he was building social programs in the UK for the homeless and people that had mental health issues. And ultimately, he actually relied on the programs that he built. And so my dad had this addiction to alcohol that was stemmed from this trauma that happened to him as a kid. And he passed away at the very start of this project in 2019. And I'm convinced he passed away because of unresolved trauma in his system, very, very young. And so, in some ways, he passed the baton over to me. But, my journey with addiction kind of started in my third year of university. Things were going tremendously well in my life. This part of the story I don't normally share, but I think it's important to share. Like, I had these real highlights. Like I was the captain of my high school football team. I went on as an 18-year-old and very quickly was running a $6 million restaurant. And then I went and had some success randomly in the door-to-door alarm industry. And so I had this I had this momentum building in my life, and I was actually quite proud of the person that I was becoming. And all of a sudden, one decision that I made ended up changing the next kind of 9-year trajectory of my life. Um, so I was in my third year of university, ended up, I'll just get straight to it. I ended up cheating on my girlfriend at the time. And that decision haunted me. It just really tore me apart inside. I kept it as a secret for about a year. And during that year of keeping it a secret, I started to drink, and I started to kind of numb myself. And I started to kind of, I was running from the destruction that I had caused. And, ultimately, when I finally did come clean with that secret, we ended up breaking up, of course. And I wasn't ready for that. I simply just wasn't. And the kind of the rug got pulled out from underneath me. And within a very short amount of time, I started to drink in the evenings. And then I was drinking to try to get to sleep. And all of a sudden, the next thing you know, I dropped out of university, and so began my path of an alcohol addiction. And very, very quickly, I went from drinking 2 days in a row to a week in a row to 6 months in a row. And, I got hired to take on this role in New York City as a 23-year-old that I got hired on the previous summer. And during the year before I showed up in New York is kind of when things kind of happened for me. And so I ended up showing up in New York, and I wasn't the same person. I wasn't the person that they had hired the previous summer. I was incredibly depressed. I was in a tremendous amount of pain. And, I ended up on the 29th story of this building in New York City. And I was just about literally just a hair away, had my legs cranked up and my body just all over this ledge that I was on. And I heard this little whisper, just make it to your sister's wedding. And thank God she got married a month later. Or else I don't think I'd be here on this call today with you, Linda. But I wanted to share that because it's, addiction isn't just something that, um, I believe that we're all just a hair away from something traumatic that could happen to any of us, really. And honestly, that traumatic moment came for me, and the next thing you know, I'm on this freaking building about to jump off in 2008. So you talked about 2016. So my life from that moment, before I pass it back to you, was kind of just this like little series of carrots to chase. Like it was just like make it to the wedding, and then it was make it to Christmas, make it to your birthday, make it to Mother's Day, and so began this life of just basically survival. And I was in so much pain. The addiction started to get worse and worse. And then finally I got into rehab in 2016, and things started to shift a little bit for me.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Wow, so many things to think about and so many things to talk about. I love that you mentioned that this could happen to anyone. We are
Yeah.
all just a hair away from making a decision where we could be just at the edge, where it's like, I don't want to do this anymore. And that feeling is so hopeless. And I'm grateful that you had something to hold on to. And how amazing that you were able to use those carrots, as you called them, to be able to function and stay alive and survive for the next 8 years. That's amazing. And isn't it interesting? You had multiple facets. You had an example in your father of, wow,
Yeah.
this is a really good way to cope, or at least this is a way to cope that I've seen. And it just seemed to make sense. And then when you make a mistake, and like a big mistake, that the guilt can just tear us up. It could be anything that just makes us feel hopeless or worthless or whatever that might be. And a natural, normal response is, I don't want to deal with that. I would rather turn away and run. I don't want to think about it. I don't want to feel it. I just want to escape. Those are normal, natural instincts that we have. I don't want to deal with that. And I'm so proud of you that at some point you finally decided, you know what? This coping plan isn't really serving me.
Yeah.
It's not helping me. In fact, it's making things worse. So I'm proud of you for functioning and to being able to make it to a chance to turn around. And you mentioned that the process of trying to go through this addiction recovery is kind of spendy, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, I ended up, so my story was for the year and a half before I got into rehab, I ended up being the first guy at the liquor store at 9 o'clock in the morning. And so it had gone to the point of just fully consuming my entire life. And to be honest, I was also the last guy at the liquor store at 11 o'clock at night. And, it got to the point where my body just completely gave out. And I remember being in my room one day and looking across the room and trying to read the big alarm clock that was on my shelf, and I couldn't see it. And so we're talking about one of those big, like red alarm clocks, the traditional ones that you see in the movies. Maybe you have one. But all of a sudden, my eyesight was giving out on me. And this sounds, there's never been a time that I've ever shared this that it doesn't just hit me in the heart. But the reality is I didn't jump off the building that day, but I was still trying to end my life with alcohol. And so I really thought that, that eyesight going was a sign that my body was giving up and I was close to death. And in fact, it was. But the reality is I started to lose feeling in my arms and my legs, and I got rushed to the hospital. And they ran my blood work when I got to the hospital, and I'll never forget the nurse coming back to the ER and looking at me and going, "I have never seen anybody with blood sugar this high that hasn't slipped into a coma." And so I realized in that moment, well, she goes, "Hang tight. I've got to send a doctor to come and talk to you." And so I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes during that call. My pancreas was completely shot. And, for me, I ended up in the hospital for several days, and my parents came, and my now wife was there. Um, and it was a life-changing moment for me, because in those days I started to really have this vision of what my funeral was going to look like and who was going to show up and the conversation that was going to be made about my life. And to be honest, I didn't like any of it. And so I realized in that moment with this diagnosis that I had an opportunity to go to rehab and to try to recreate that story that was being played out in my head. And I was blessed. I ended up going to a rehab facility off the coast of Vancouver. I'm up in Canada, and and this particular rehab facility was all based around mindfulness, and so it was yoga and breath work and beautiful food and nature, and of course all sorts of therapy. And there's a moment that happened in this rehab that has actually led me to the work that I'm doing today. And I don't often share it, but I'll share it with you just because I know we're kind of limited to a short pocket of time. So we'll get into it. But um, for anybody that doesn't know what rehab's all about, the whole process is about to try to reverse engineer how you got there and to go back to, the traumatic moments in your life, identify them, and essentially try to go and heal them. And, for me, I just went all in. I knew that I might not have another opportunity. And so any chance that I had to speak or to share or to like try to unpack my own shit, to be honest, I took advantage of the moment. Um, and yeah, so we were all about to go back into the world, essentially. It was the end of my 30 days, 28 days in this facility. And you really get to know the people in there because, like I said, you're trying to reverse engineer how you got there. So, like, you're fast tracking relationships that, in the end, you probably have, more about these people than potentially your own family knows about you. And that was the case for me. And so you really start to bond with these people. And so, anyways, right before we left, there was this conversation that took place where we were asked to go in this big circle. And the director of the facility was in the middle of this circle. And we all thought we were getting this pep talk to go back out into the world, kind of this little pat on the butt to get back out there. And it was going to be a happy kind of conversation. But what actually happened was she said something along the lines of this. She goes, "Look to the person to the left of you." And so we all kind of take this gazing look to the person to the left of you, and you're making this eye contact, and you had no idea what was coming. And she goes, "That person's dead, in 365 days or less. And I'll tell you, to this day, I don't know if I've ever heard anything that had moved me in a way that comment moved me. And within seconds, we're all crying now, and we're all going, "Holy shit, this is not what I expected to hear." Like, but and then she goes, "Look to the person to the right." And so we all go to the person to the right, and like I said, we're all crying. And she goes, "That person's back in one of these facilities in 365 days or less." And none of us knew this about addiction. None of us knew this about the rehab model and about how slim of a chance you actually have to recover. And that stayed with me. And in that moment, I realized, you know what, I'm going to do everything that I possibly can with the skills that I have to try to make an impact in those numbers and try to make an impact to this community, the community that I belong to now. It's this community of people that have been through some stuff. And so ultimately that stayed with me. I'll kind of pause it there to let you kind of maybe hop into the conversation so I don't just flow this whole thing. But ultimately that led to the work that I'm doing today, that conversation.
Wow. Thank you for bringing that up. That's amazing. And those statistics are consistent everywhere.
Yeah.
So I volunteer at a jail and we work with a
Wow.
lot of people who are struggling with addiction. That's a very common reason why our inmates are there.
Right.
And
Wow.
when people are released, it is about a 70% chance that they will be back. And there is an in-house treatment program. And if they go through the program, the statistics are 65% chance that they will be coming back. But if they do a treatment program inside the jail and then another one when they get out, then it's a 30% chance of coming back. But it has to be, like you said, you're ready to get out into the world. It's like, okay, right here, right now, I'm clean. Right here, right now, I am dry. Now, what happens the minute that someone offers me a drink or offers me a chance to get high or offers me a whatever my particular vice happens to be? And so we need to, as you mentioned earlier, we need to go back to the why the pain and be
Right.
able to heal that underneath. So um, the statistics are quite sobering and they're quite frustrating for people who are trying to become free. And part of what you do now is some additional tools to help people be able to address not only the addiction, but the pain in a way that is non-addictive. Coping, it doesn't heal us. There's a difference between coping and healing. Addictions are coping. We want to work into healing. And so
Yes.
you did a study in 2020. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah. Well, totally. And thank you for all that. And thank you for sharing all that. That's yeah, it's mind bending. Um, when you really look at the data, just how challenging it is to recover from something like this. And so, in 2019, kind of fast forward from when I got out of rehab, like of course I had no idea how I was going to help this community. I thought originally that I was just going to go and make as much money as I possibly could. And then one day I'd start sending someone to rehab every single year for the rest of my life. That's literally what I thought was going to happen. But here's what ended up happening was 6 months out of rehab when I started to rebuild a business and I started to get the momentum back in my life. My confidence started to come back. Very slowly. It took about a year to get my brain to kind of get back to a place where I could, have a conversation like this with somebody like you. But the reality is I got a call and it was somebody from the rehab facility that was a patient. And he said, "Man, have you heard about what happened?" And I said, "No." And he goes, "Well, grab a seat because you're going to be blown away." And yeah, in that call, he announced that 6 people out of the 30 were already dead, and 4 overdoses, a murder, a suicide. And so that one kicked me in the ass to really kind of try to figure out how to make, how to move things along in a different direction for me. And so, but yeah, my story, I went and I got into another business. And again, I was just trying to make money because I felt so far behind. I was $70,000 in debt. I had a decade's worth of unpaid taxes. I didn't expect to live. So I had this 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 massive mess to kind of clean up in my own life. But the reality is I had some opportunities start to show up, and some bigger opportunities started to show up, and I took these opportunities, and all of a sudden I hadn't had a drink in about 3.5 years, but I was involved in a business that I was getting horrific anxiety driving to my office every single morning. And I didn't know at the time, but it was kind of the universal sign of the universe saying, hey, you're kind of out of alignment here. This isn't what you're supposed to be doing. I can look at it now and kind of see it that way. But I was really close to a relapse. And I remember calling my parents and having a conversation with my wife and saying, you guys, I don't know how I'm going to make it because this is consuming me. The stress is consuming me. I'm so close to relapsing. I just wanted to share this with you. And it became evident that I had to leave the job that I was on. And so I did. And at about that pocket of time, I got introduced to a mycologist. So for anybody that doesn't know what that is, it's essentially a mushroom farmer. It's someone who basically dedicates their life to growing mushrooms. And he came into my life at the exact moment that I needed him to show up. And he started to teach me about mushrooms and the potential healing capacities in regards to psilocybin. And it was a brand new conversation for me. And, it came at a time that I was really looking for something. I was looking for a tool to help me stay sober, or off the booze, I should say, because I was into cannabis, so I wouldn't say sober, but off the alcohol. And ironically, he was doing a renovation on the apartment that we had. And so he started to come over every day. And by the end of his time with me, he gave me some mushrooms. And I started my own little microdosing journey. And this is 2019 in Calgary. So in Alberta, Western Canada. I'm not sure where you're from, Linda, but this wasn't a conversation really taking place in Calgary at the time. It's a huge conversation here now. I'm hosting an event this evening all about mushroom. It's a mushroom chat tonight. So this conversation's happening now, but back then it really was kind of taboo to be sharing some of the insights around mushrooms, or at least it felt that way. And I had this prolific experience. Microdosing started to really change my life. I got for me, it was the first time that I can ever remember about learning about something that just purely lit me up. Like, I am talking about a feeling that I'd really never had in my life. And so when I started to uncover this research about mushrooms and all of these studies that were taking place around the world and the potential of it, it really got me excited. And so now I've got a bunch of research, and now I've got my own experience of just starting to shift some things in my own life using microdosing. And then to circle back to what you asked about the study, this is kind of where the study came in, because I knew that I didn't know enough at the time to build a business. I didn't want to just jump into something and not really have all my ducks in a row. So I wanted to buy myself some time. And the way that I bought myself some time was I teamed up with a friend who's got a background in psychology. And I had at that point kind of been researching mushrooms for 3 or 4 months. I had a really good baseline as to my knowledge. But I wanted to see if it worked on other people. And so we put this self-funded study together, kind of citizen science project. Still to this day, I believe it's the only one ever done on microdosing in Canada. But the reality is we put this questionnaire together. It was 13 questions. And the idea was to get a really good baseline as to where people were at with their mental health and their anxiety levels and their happiness levels. I provided the medicine. And at the end of the 42 days, we ran the exact same questionnaire. And then I hired a company to tally the data to see how the needle moved in people's lives. And to be honest with you, Linda, to this day, there's never been anything more rewarding in my career than this study, because the way the needle moved in these people's lives was enough to make your jaw hit the floor. It was just like you were uncovering something that is just beyond exciting to me. And so that's how this project started, was with this little study. And one of the 40 people that was in it, she was my age, so 35 at the time, and she shares her story. I have it filmed, and she's allowed us to use her story in her testimonial. But um, she had been in and out of therapy since she was 14 years old, and she had heard about this study, but at the same time, she had already committed. She was so out of gas that she had committed to dying, similar to where I was at. She had her suicide plan, the note, what she was going to wear, where she was going to do it, everything mapped out. And a friend of hers had told her about the study, and she said, "Okay, I'll give this one last thing a shot." And she's still alive today with us. And but that story was enough for me to build this company. It took another 18 months after the study before we brought a product to market. And now, since 2021, we have over 1 million microdosing capsules in the market here in Canada. We've created the safest, the most consistent, and the highest vibrational frequency mushroom company, I believe, that you can find anywhere in the world today. So extraordinarily proud of what we built, but everything that we've done here has been to really just help other people.
I loved that. And I'm so happy that she was willing to give one more try and to be able to participate in something. That is fantastic. All right. So, in case anyone who's listening is not familiar with anything about mushrooms, let's just give just a
Totally.
little bit more of information for him. So, if anyone has not yet seen the documentary called Fantastic Fungi, that's a
Yeah.
really, really good place to start to just kind of recognize what can be done. And some things about mushrooms is that they have the way that they grow underground. It is similar to the way that our brain cells, the synapses, the connections, and it improves the neuroplasticity of the brain, which means our ability to adapt. It actually helps create new neural pathways. So, for example, if you're stuck in a pathway of this is the way I think, and if you're struggling with depression, it might be everyone would be better without me. And you're it's like you're on a track in a car driving around and around and around. There are no exits. There's no way to get off of this cyclical path. And when we're able to create new neural pathways, it's almost like creating an exit where we can get off of that pathway and think some new thoughts. And it does it on a physiological level. And the data, the research backs this up, which is so exciting because when we're stuck in these ideas, these patterns, it's really hard to get out without maybe some assistance in some way or another. So I am delighted that you had success in your research study, and it's wonderful to add that piece to some of the other research studies that have been done and to be able to say, wow, this is an amazing tool, and I'm delighted. So congratulations for your success. And as you share the story with the 6 people out of your 30 dying, my heart hurts. That conversation, that sobering conversation of look to your left and look to your right came true. And I would really love for that to not be the case. I would love for more people to be able to say, look to your left, look to your right. We're going to support each other and we're going to succeed. I wish that that were the story more often.
Yeah. So well said. And thank you for sharing that piece about the mushrooms, because the science and the data is what really drew me. And so, yeah, check out Fantastic Fungi for anybody that just wants to learn more about the work that we're doing here. We also provide a microdosing guide on our website. It's completely free. It's a 62-page document. I believe it's the most comprehensive guide available, and it's everything that I've learned in the past 5 years put into this document that we give to you for free. And so if you're interested in the science and the data and some of the research, we put it together in this package for you. Mindfulmeds.io. All you have to do is put in your email and we'll email it to you immediately. And I work with people for free. We offer coaching, 15-minute coaching sessions just to get people heard, to hear about your own individual story. And then we have 16 different products that we put into the market. And so I help you get paired up with the exact products that I think would be helpful for your own individual situation. And yeah, I would love to hear from you.
Yeah. Well, thank you. This has been delightful. Oh, let's also just quickly, microdosing, if anyone is not familiar with that term, is
Yeah.
really, really, really tiny, tiny amounts. So we're not trading one addiction for another. We're not hallucinating. We're not any of those kinds of things. They're talking about just tiny, tiny little dose, just a little bit of a change. We still, I think on your website it said 18 and older. I think in the United States it's 21 and older. So we're still trying to be careful because they're powerful. So,
Yeah.
but
Yeah, well said. So we're talking sub-intoxicating to the point where Linda, we'd be on this podcast together and you wouldn't even really know that the medicine was in your system. That is generally a true microdose. But depending on what it is that you're up against, whether it be depression, anxiety, ADHD, OCD, maybe you're a creative looking for a creative spark. That's a bit of a different dose. And on the way other side of the spectrum, we also work with the professional athletes and the C-suite executives. And so we build products for everybody in between. And so, yeah, if you're interested in learning more, please head over to the site. And yeah, any of the people that listen to this are welcome to come into the back end of the DMs on Instagram. Either myself or somebody from our team will line up an opportunity to connect with you one-on-one.
that's awesome. What a wonderful opportunity to be able to meet one on one. Keegan, thank you. Is there anything else you want to make sure we cover before we close today?
I think, just sharing this idea that if you are struggling, you know, there's not many people that I know that maybe aren't struggling right now. It's the one thing that we all have in common, but it is just so okay to ask for help. And we're certainly here to help any way that we can. And it's something that we know well. So thank you. Thank you for having me. It's been lovely to connect. And I love what you're doing here in these kind of just short windows, getting straight to it. And I hope that somebody listening, I hope this was helpful for somebody.
Thank you. And we do have a kind of a short conversation, but hopefully it's enough to spark an interest where if someone
Yeah.
is saying, I want to know more, then it's okay
Yeah.
because they know where to go to get more. So, Keegan, thank you for visiting with me today.
Thank you, Linda. Have a great afternoon,
You
and
too.
we'll chat soon.
In closing, I like to share a quote by John Green. He said, "There is hope, even when your brain tells you there isn't." Today, I invite any of our listeners who are struggling with mental health to embrace hope and be open to new tools to become the best version of yourself. See you next time on Linda's Corner. Thanks for tuning in to Linda's Corner podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and share it with your friends to help us inspire even more listeners. Be sure to visit hopeforhealingfoundation.org for free and affordable resources to help you overcome life's challenges. And explore healingbreathworkdetox.com, where you'll find transformative tools for deep inner healing and lasting change. Also, don't forget to check out my books, Crushed, A Journey Through Depression, and You Got This, an action plan to calm fear, anxiety, worry, and stress. Your journey to hope, healing, and happiness starts here.